Before I begin with Jim, I want to give a little bit about his background. He is the former CEO of American Eagle Outfitters. Prior to joining American Eagle, he held executive leadership positions with several companies in various industries, including Sears, Coleman Capital, C. Everett Koop Foundation, Computer-Aided System, The Gap, where he worked for 12 years and served as Chief Operating Officer. He's currently owner of JOD Wayne Advisors based in Wayne, PA, and serves as a board member and advisor to American Eagle, DSW, and Loblaw Companies Limited, a $45 billion grocery, pharmaceutical, and apparel company. He's a valued member of Villanova University's Board of Trustees and previously served as a member of the VSB's Dean's Advisory Council and the College of Nursing's Board of Consultors. Jim and his wife Charlotte have generously invested in Villanova in a variety of ways, including an endowed chair position in the College of Nursing, in honor of your mother, that's correct, right? And more recently, through their $5 million commitment to establish the Villanova School of Business's Charlotte and James V. O'Donnell 63 Center for Professional Development. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Jim, it's a great opportunity. Last year we did a fireside chat with Father Peter, and it was one of the best received parts of our program. And so it is just an honor to share the stage with you, and thank you for being here.
Tough act to follow.
So why don't you begin, maybe tell us how you ended up at Villanova. I know you're a local guy, but fill us in a little.
Well, we'll give you the short version. My parents were very educational-centric. I was very sports-centric. So in the spring of my senior year, two Major League Baseball teams decided to hold some regional tryouts in this area. And they were comprised of Eastern PA, Delaware, and New Jersey. Anyway, so I get an invitation to try out, and as luck would have it, I get offers from both teams to go to low minor league teams. So being an excited 17-year-old, I get home, I tell my parents, I just got accepted to play minor league baseball, and I'm really excited. I look over at my dad, I look over at my mother, forlorn look. So I go, what's the problem? She said, not gonna happen. True story. So I said, but this is something I really want to do. And then the parental candor came out. You're a better student than you are an athlete. And so with that door closed, the Villanova door opened.
That's great. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than you never know in life. Right?
Well, had I gone the other way, I'd probably be delivering FedEx packages here, so.
So tell us a little bit about your Villanova experience. How did it influence your career? What was your first job out of school as well?
Well, I think like most of us that attended Villanova and graduated, you don't know what to expect when you first come to the campus. And my expectations were probably like any other freshman, they were very minimal, and which means I had no clue. But over the years, it's amazing through the, not just through the academic side, but also the cultural side. I started to develop and mature as a young person. And when I embarked on my first job, which happened to be with Sears upon graduation, I didn't realize what I brought with me that the university had exposed me to. And it was the structure, the discipline, and probably most of all, this real code of ethics that was instilled in me. And it really helped me in my initial years, and then also guided me later on.
That's great. That's great. So I was going to ask, were there later connections with Villanova that helped at all? Any networking? Did you come across, you spent a lot of time in California, but
I did.
Did you run across any Villanovans? I mean, outside the university connection that...
Well, yes and no. Villanova on the West Coast was just starting to get an emerging reputation. But one thing I did find as I was traveled around the country, and being with Gap and then subsequently with American Eagle, I got to work with lots of young people. And invariably, the question would always come up, what school did you attend, and so forth and so on. And when I would mention Villanova, it always, and I mean always, got very positive responses as to, wow, I hear that's a great school, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they all remember that we won the national championship in basketball, but we'll let that be what it is. But it was a sense of pride, I must tell you, that the school was so well received. Interesting enough, though, when I was living on the West Coast post-graduation, I was not contacted by anyone in Villanova for about 20-some years. And I thought that was a issue with the university that really needed to be addressed. And interesting enough, I get a phone call out of the blue that Villanova wants to pay a visit to me, and Father Dobbin was coming out to the West Coast, and could he stop by and say hi, which I knew what hi meant, you know. So at the time, I had left Gap, and I always wanted to run my own business, and I bought a small company in Hayward, California. It was a material handling and software company, and I left $4 billion of revenue, top line revenue, to this company of 1.5 million. And you want to talk about culture shock. So anyway, we had this cool little system, and we were starting to get a little traction. So Father Dobbin comes out with the head of fundraising, and so we had a beta site in our facility. And if you know Father Dobbin, he's a very inquisitive guy. So he's only supposed to be there for like a half an hour. So 2 hours later, he's still fooling around with the equipment and running the software and all. I'm looking at my watch and said, "When does this guy get out of here?" You know. And but anyway, short story on is that was the first check that I wrote to the university. Not literally, but I pledged some $35,000, of which he was very grateful. But I think the important message that he took away was my candor, because I told him, I said, you know, I've been out here for, at that time, about 16, 17 years, you know, and like no one even contacted me to say, hey, how you doing, you know, and I said, I'm sure there's lots of me around the country, and I think you ought to step up your whole fundraising operation, your institutional advancement organization, and be more proactive, because there's a great number of successful Villanovans out there that I'm sure would like to give something back to the university.
And have you seen changes then? What year was that? That's 80?
This would have been left Gap in 80s. Well, it's called late 80s.
Late 80s.
Yeah, and so yes, there was change. It was slow. But, you know, having been associated with Villanova, I think slow is how it goes, you know. And but there was a groundswell, I think, to get out and touch more Villanovans other than a small group that had been the primary givers of within the university. And you know, the endowment to this day still suffers from that lack of universal involvement.
Yeah, the time value of money, there's no making up for that, really.
Yeah.
Tell us about your, when you got involved with the nursing school. That was a big engagement opportunity for us.
Yeah, that was another little bit of family shock within within my family, is that when my mom passed away, my children said, you know, Dad, we really should do something for Grandma. And I said, yeah, I know, in her honor. And so I said, but I don't have any idea what to do. So now I only know this woman now for like 58 years. So I find out that she always wanted to be a nurse. So my children tell me, I always wanted to be a nurse. So I said, the light goes on. So I had my oldest do a little homework. She's also an alum from Villanova, undergraduate and master's. I said, okay, you do the legwork and find out what we can do. So she comes back and says, you know, we could fund a scholarship in the School of Nursing in her honor. And I said, wow, that's really a cool thing. And it's probably one of the neatest things I ever did. So her name will live on.
And that's when you joined the Board of Consultors there at
I did. And I worked with Louise for a couple of years before they asked me to come on to the Board of Trustees.
Great.
which Louise was not very happy, but she called it poaching. But
It's not. If I see Father Peter back in the room, we won't call it poaching right now. With your recent gift, why did you decide to direct? We had a lot of discussions. There was another number of opportunities, but this idea of professional development, why did that resonate with you? What are some of your thoughts around that?
well, I think it's interesting. I think it's a good story. Giving the money or the gift, if you will, that was really the easy part, fortunately. But I just didn't want to write a check and have it fall into some dark hole within the university and not get an overall feeling that it went in the right direction. And I'm sure it would have, but I'm all about specifics. And I wanted to have the funding be able to touch as many students as possible, but in a very specific way. And when Pat and I met, after I had laid down some of the requirements that I had, he said, let me go back and see what we can do. And I have a few ideas, and we'll meet again, and we'll kick the thing around. So he comes back and introduced this Center for Professional Development, which is really a fancy term of really preparing these young students from freshman year to a lesser degree up through senior year to a greater degree, and preparing them for post-graduation as they enter into the real world of employment. And the components within the center are real and they're tangible, and I think they're going to have great value. And I think through Brenda's leadership, they'll be great.
Yeah, Brenda Stover is going to be executive director of the O'Donnell Center when we are finalized and have established it formally. So we're excited about that.
And I think it's worthy to mention that some of the components, are things like resume writing, interviewing skills, assisting in internships and co-ops. These all add real value and real benefit to the student that they can take on in post-graduation, or as the overarching theme of backpack to briefcase.
Yeah, so the Backpack to Briefcase program is a 2-credit professional development sequence that all business students are required to take. That's quite unique in business schools, that it is actually baked into the curriculum. And the classic model has been that the best students would go seek out this kind of help, and they were the ones that kind of least needed it. So now that baking in 2 credits of professional development throughout the 4 years and having the opportunity to do that is something that's exciting, a differentiator for our students. In addition, this fall, all of our freshmen will be required to become Bloomberg certified. As far as we know, we're the only business school in the country that will have that opportunity for all of our students. And again, this is all because of Jim's generosity. Just one piece I would share, and if you get a sense of this already, that Jim is a great companion for any breakfast or lunch. So I'm fortunate to have the chance to sit across from him. And in that particular meeting where I went back and we started putting some ideas together, I slid it across the table at Manella's. Is anybody familiar with Manella's? So
the executive dining room.
Wanted to make sure I really wined and dined him. We went high class.
Nothing but the top shelf.
But the top shelf. He read it. He said, "This looks great. Let's do it." So it was. Truly, it's one of those moments in your life where, for me, you just can't believe you're sitting at the table with somebody who's sharing so much of their.
Well, in all candor, it really resonated. It was simple, yet I think it had all the components of. I didn't know what I was thinking about, but when presented with it, it really hit home. And I said, "Pat, that's it. You nailed it." And I'm really proud to be part of it. And I look forward to adding whatever help and assistance I can give throughout the center. We're there for you.
We appreciate it very much. One thing I wanted to ask you, because I was curious on your perspective. I'm sure that you, as you alluded, you get lots of calls from lots of organizations that would be interested in you being affiliated with them in some way, shape, or form. And so when you think about an investment in Villanova versus other types of nonprofits, how do you weigh that? How do you sort of calculate where your money might work the best for you and where the best investment lies? Why Villanova?
I'm not sure what other nonprofits provide, to be perfectly honest, but I know that Villanova and my actually closer association over the last number of years, that whatever investment that we make, all of us within the university is well, the investment is first of all received with a great deal of gratitude, and also there's a lot of forethought, and you get a sense as a donor that the best efforts are going to be placed behind it, and I think that's very gratifying, and I'm not sure how the other nonprofits work, but I know that the Villanova and Father Peter on through the whole organization is very committed, very dedicated, and very passionate, and I love seeing it, and I love being associated with it.
Great. A question I wanted to ask you was, in terms of you've had great executive experience, but you've also been a trustee now here for a number of years. In terms of being an executive in the real world, so to speak, and a trustee, what do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities facing Villanova and higher ed generally?
Well, I think there's quite a few. Being on the board of trustees, you're really exposed to all the inner workings of the university, as well as all the external challenges that are out there. But not to go on and on, but I think right now they're very obvious. You mentioned one of it in your presentation, and that is the cost of tuition. I think as tuition continues to escalate, and you have the pressures on the endowment to help provide some subsidies, if you will, aid for students who qualify or students that we recruit, is going to be a major challenge. The other is diversity. I think the university has come a long way, but still has a very long way to go in the area of diversity. And again, that puts pressure on the endowment to be able to go out and identify and recruit these very capable young people. And I think thirdly, and definitely not last, but in this presentation it will be last, is that there's going to be lots of pressure from online. I think these online universities, with their ability to reach out to multiple thousands of students at a very reduced cost, and they offer some quality coursework and subsequently, a diploma upon graduation. I think it's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on the brick and mortar universities and colleges to continue to identify, recruit, and encourage people to matriculate to Villanova.
Yeah, that's such an insightful comment too, as well. So the uncertainty level is very high when it comes to online. I mentioned our online MBA and Master of Science in Analytics.
That's a microcosm.
It is, and it's an opportunity for us to hypothesis test and figure out what works and what doesn't work. I don't think I said this, but we would love our Villanova community to look to send us students to those programs. We hope to make them very successful and spread the Villanova brand. Any final comments or thoughts that you'd like to?
Well, I think a little bit of a hybrid might be the future, and I think you're starting to touch on it. And that could be, how you could utilize both. You can utilize the physical facility as well as the online, because with the pressures within the curriculums, with coursework being what it is, in some cases, an online course or courses might take a little bit of pressure off the student and add, an element of another avenue to take that might put them in a better position and also move them forward towards ultimately graduation. But it's going to be a challenge, but I don't think it's a challenge that can't be overcome. I really don't.
We're very cautiously moving in at the undergrad level into anything online, because we think that the in-person experience, especially at a Villanova community, is so central. These part-time programs, they've never been very much residency-based, and so it is a place for us to try these things out. Although, to your point, in the MBA program, we have a couple of residency requirements. So the hybrid model does seem to be one that's shaking out, so it's interesting to hear your...
I think one of the things that continues to be in the favor of the brick and mortar universities and colleges is that for all of us that matriculated through is the whole social aspect, the maturity aspect. there's a chance that you lose that with an online. Not having been an online student, I'm speaking from theory, but from the practical side, we know when we come to campus, we make friends. We friends in some cases for life. But we have experiences, highs and lows. But there's a whole maturation process that goes along with those 4 years, and I don't think that can be duplicated online. I just don't.
Great. So what is your next act? I know you're very heavily involved with DSW and Loblaw. What are you most excited about that you're working on right now?
Well, as you mentioned, I advise American Eagle and DSW, which is Designer Shoe Warehouse for those of you who aren't familiar with the company. It's about a $2.5 billion company. And also Loblaws, which is a $45 billion grocery chain up in Canada, but they have an apparel division that they want to take internationally, and I'm assisting them with that initiative. And then naturally, I'm on the board of trustees at Villanova. The common denominator of that portfolio is that all but one I pay. The others pay me, so you can figure out which one that is.
That's great. We're happy about that.
Father Peter didn't have to think very long, I'll tell you.
That's right. Terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have a few minutes. I thought we'd open it up to any questions that anyone would have, both in terms of what I presented before Jim's session or for Jim himself. See if we can answer any questions that come up or discuss any. Jeff.
What's been the role of innovation over the course of your career and how that's played out in your success and
It's, it's one of the cornerstones, Jeff. I have to, innovation is a term that's kicked around, quite often, but, he or she who doesn't innovate won't be around very long in business. Fortunately, the companies that I was fortunate to be with, especially when I was with Gap and with American Eagle, and then my own little company that I sold, that I had, as I said, volume was 1.5 million. When I sold it 5 years later, I had one of these Godfather offers, and we were doing $65 million, and we had $45 million of business in the pipeline, and that was just over a span of 5 years. That was all innovation. I was very blessed to have really smart, creative people working with me, and only had 35 employees when I first started. And when I sold it 5 years later, I still had those 35 plus 250 more. But innovation was the thread, the common denominator that made that company tick. But in the areas of corporations, Gap, American Eagle, the Select Two, we weren't on the bleeding edge, but we were on the cutting edge of technology and innovation. And we had very creative people. You look at a pair of blue jeans, jeans, and you say, what's so great about that? Well, when you're in the teen market, you better have the right stitching, you better have the right silhouette, you better have the right wash, you better have all these little details that comprise this garment. And it all comes down to creative innovation. And to me, that's the lifeblood of an organization, no matter what the size is, publicly or privately traded.
You were with the Gap. I mean, many of us here are of the same generation. The Gap was a huge deal in the 80s. It was, and so of all the experiences you've had across your career, what was the most exciting? When do you remember being the most engaged and excited?
Well, Gap was like, I was there when they were dumb, and then they got smart real fast, but they were exciting years because they were unbelievable growth years, and the brand ended up being the #1 brand with 15 to 25-year-olds, but they were really 14 to 19 or 20 was really the core customer. Very fickle, very demanding, and short attention spans and so forth. So you had to be hip all the time, and we kind of drank the Kool-Aid, and we thought we were hip, and so the kids thought we were hip. But it was a great run. I think a big part of the takeaways that I had was that I helped and assisted to taking the company internationally, and that was a great, because I had no clue what to do, like none. And it was all OJT, but it was exciting. And you're dealing with different cultures, different rules, different monetary funds and so forth. And it was very gratifying. I got to do it again with American Eagle, and it was equally as gratifying. But I think it's nothing like when you do it the first time. And it was neat. And we were a rapidly growing company, and I was very highly invested in within the company, both financially as well as compensation, but also I was very involved and had a sizable stake in the ownership of the company, because the founder was a big believer in taking all of the key men and women in the company and making sure that they all had major equity positions, and we literally had very little turnover in the company, and it really helped during that growth cycle, because we had some really good people who were highly recruited, but were really were committed to staying with the company. So I would say that run was probably the most exciting.
Yeah.
And I was younger then too, so.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mark.
So, how do you balance innovation versus execution? And sort of what I mean by that is you're always thinking about how to do it better. Sometimes you lose track of what you actually need to do right in front of you. So how do you balance that sort of short-term, long-term decision making?
That's a really great question.
Just to repeat the question, we're going to have a microphone, but Mark asked, how do you balance innovation and execution, essentially?
And there is a fine line there, Mark. It gets down to, it's a little bit corny, but you have to know when to say when and say okay. But you always have a group of people that are pushing the envelope. But you also have a group of people that are making sure the trains run on time. And you have to be able to balance between the two. You can't get overly involved operationally day to day and forget about what you're going to do down the road. But also you can't be experimenting all the time and never really get the product to market. So it's a real balancing act as you run the business. And and it isn't a committee of one. It's a committee of many that help, especially in the major corporations. Because today there's lots of buzz around about technology, about innovation, and that's all well and good. But it can also be overdone. And I'm a big believer in both innovation, but also the practical side. Like, what are we here to do today, and then what are our objectives for tomorrow? And you have to, from time to time, you got to pull yourself back and reevaluate those strategies and say, are you on course, or have you sort of taken a side road? And that's one of the exciting things about being part of a major business with many components and many moving parts. But the good companies do it; they really do. And those that do not, they're not around. The corporate graveyards have plenty of headstones for those that opted not to move forward.
Great. Other questions? Yes, Steve. Steve, hold on. Let's wait for a microphone for you, Steve.
Jim, I think most of us will agree with you, or maybe all of us agree with you, that innovation is the lifeblood. How do you take, what we do in the business world and take that same premise to a university situation? And can you say that there's disruptive innovation that Villanova University can do? What's your view on it? Can it break out and not lose its core values at the same time?
Well, that's a great question. I think in my limited exposure to the academia university, and then comparing it up against business, how business is run, there are similar components, but there's a vast difference. I find academia to be slower, a little more methodical, lots of research, lots of second guessing. but ultimately they get to where they want to get to. If you operated under that same model in business, you probably wouldn't be in business very long. And so when I'm on the board of trustees and we're dealing with all of these issues, and Sheila, who's on the board with me, she can attest to this. I mean, those of us that are from fast-paced businesses, we got to throttle back a little bit. We got to kind of pump the brakes, but still continue to push forward because that's why we're there. But I think the short answer is that the board of trustees, and I'm have been on a few boards, and I'm still on a few, but they're small. They're usually 10 or 12 people, not like-minded, but goal-oriented. At Villanova, we have like 33 or 34 trustees, and you would think with that many personalities that the issues and the input would get kind of muddled. But I've not seen a group of people that are really, they're single-minded, and if I can speak for them, they're single-minded in that we're there to do the best thing for this university, and we're going to do it the right way. And if there's some pushback because, we don't want to hear it, they're still going to hear it because that's the way it is. And but I found that this university is very open, and I think they're I don't think I know they're very gracious and very thankful that the trustees are as candid as we are, and they know we have the greater good of the university. But that's a really good question because I think universities could get bogged down in their long underwear. I really do. And with the pace of the world today, you really need to have your foot in the accelerator.
Yes.
Yeah, Jim, if the President of the United States called you up and said, Jim, what are the 3 things I could do to help improve the economy and employment? Because we have so many underemployed and unemployed people still in this country. What would you tell them?
Well, being candid, I'm not a big admirer of our chief, but although I do think he's a good man. I think that, first of all, the impasse in Washington, as we all know, is embarrassing. It's can't get anything done. It's too many. It's too many factions. It's no one really wants to work together. They all profess to work together, but I think they really need to get out of the way. There's jobs to be out there. There's stimulus that you can put out there, but it's not the kind of stimulus that I think bureaucrats who most have never held a real job in their lives that they could understand and drive initiatives and strategies that will help the economy, that will help reduce unemployment. You've got lots of people out there really willing to work. They talk about the unemployment rate being 6 or 7%, but we all know you could put a multiplier on that, at least another point or two for people who have just given up, and they're qualified people. So I don't think there's any real easy answer. I think it's $1 million question, but I think that the politicians have to get out of the way, and they should really get some business people, some heads of corporate titans, if you will, but not so much the visible, PR leaders, the CEOs, if you will, but get down in the organization, because in most corporations, the people who really are pushing many of the buttons, it's not the top man or woman that you see in the media, but it's really a group of people under them that are really driven and committed. And those people really have an understanding of how business works, and also where we could take and put innovation in, put technology to work, and create jobs that are very meaningful. The issue today is, the job markets are shrinking. They're not expanding, and to hear stimulus packages that, we're going to go out and build more roads and bridges, anybody can talk about that. That's real short-sighted. How do you really build for the future? How do you take this country, that's supposedly number one in the world, but how do you really make it a real leader, a real model for emerging countries to want to emulate? I don't know that we're that country. We probably are close, but I know we could be. But my advice would be, get the H out of the way and get some people in there that understand how businesses work, how jobs are created. Like I mentioned in a microcosmic form, I had this little company, 35 employees, and I had about 6 to 8 weeks worth of my own money there in the bank to keep this baby moving. And in week 5, we sold a $200 million contract to Levi Strauss to build 3 distribution centers for them. And I had to tell you something, I aged about 20 years in those 5 or 6 weeks, but that was one of the most gratifying times in my life. And we took 35 jobs, and then we took those 35 and added 250 more jobs in a matter of a couple of years. So it can be done, but I sure couldn't have done it with a lot of political restraints and governmental regulations and so forth and so on that really would have stymied from moving quickly to innovate and get this little company to be a little bit larger.
Terrific. Well, our time's up. I must say, I said it last night, I'll say it again, I do believe sometimes, many times, that I have the best job in the world, and getting the chance to spend time with Jim and many of you, I mean, it's just, I'm very honored and appreciative of that, and thank you for spending time with us today, and thank you for your generosity and your support of Villanova.
I have one question for you.
Oh.
Do you have interest in Manilas? Thank you all very much.